The pangs of regret clawed at me as I stared out of the sleek floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown apartment, overlooking a city that glittered like a mirage below. My heart raced with the reality of my choices. I had committed the cardinal sin. I cheated on Derek. The whirlwind of emotions had led me to this point, and the fallout was almost too heavy to bear. I was now officially divorced, my marriage dismantled because I let the rush of shameful curiosity take the wheel, leading me to a man I barely knew, but found utterly irresistible. My name is Lila, a 29-year-old entrepreneur, but the label felt insufficient. I dabbled in various ventures, from running pop-up boutiques to freelance projects that never seemed to stick. I craved spontaneity, the thrill of new experiences, which meant I rarely stayed in one lane for too long, and while I earned my keep, it was but a shadow compared to what Derek brought home. He was a successful radiologist, dedicated and brilliant, yet he was always drowning in work. At 39, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, a striking body that had once drawn me in. However, as our relationship deepened, I discovered his prowess didn't extend to our bedroom, a realization that left me feeling neglected and yearning for more. I found myself entrapped in a web of dissatisfaction. Derek worked tirelessly, often melting into fatigue at the end of the day. I had hoped our intimacy would improve over time, but that dream fizzled away as quickly as it came. I tried to remain patient, convincing myself that love would overcome the emptiness, and for the longest time it did. Until the day I laid eyes on Jordan. Jordan, my accomplice, my flame of temptation. A confident man with a chiseled jaw and impeccable style that radiated charisma. I had first encountered him at an art exhibit where I had taken Mia for inspiration for our men's fashion line. His effortless charm was magnetic, drawing me closer with his engaging conversation. I felt my heart race, a mix of intrigue and danger that I hadn't experienced in years. His attention was a spark, igniting a dangerous curiosity within me. And in that moment, I couldn't help but compare him to the void I felt with Derek. As I navigated my business with Mia, selling men's clothing online seemed strange, but it was intentional. We were buyers of bold men who skip the bargaining game that women love to play. The decision to enter this market stemmed not just from potential profit, but from its ability to push boundaries. Just like I was desperate for something to awaken me, something that would break the monotony of my rules and routines. Little did I know, it wasn't only the business that would take a drastic turn, it would be my entire life. Before I knew it, I found myself caught up in a frenzy of feelings I couldn't ignore. The sharp pang of desire tangled itself with guilt as I stole away moments with Jordan, trying to keep things light, yet each shared laugh and stolen glance felt like a seduction. One night, amidst the chaos of a pop-up event, he leaned in closer as we discussed the finer details of our fashion choices, his voice low and inviting. The air buzzed with an electric tension that was impossible to dismiss. Every heartbeat echoed my internal conflict. And there it was, the moment I allowed my curiosity to tear my world apart. It was more than temptation. It was an awakening fueled by a hunger I hadn't acknowledged. I took the plunge into the unknown, and there was no turning back. Now, as I stand in the aftermath of my choices, a divorce that felt like a punch to the gut, I'm left grappling with my decisions. Did I throw away a marriage for a fleeting thrill? Was it truly worth it? My mind drifts back to the sparks of joy I felt during those illicit encounters, but also the pain that followed when reality came crashing down. Despair mingles with the liberation of knowing I am free to rediscover myself. I now embrace the road ahead and determined to sift through the wreckage and seek a new chapter that's entirely mine. Derek has this way of just placing orders without a second thought, and then I find out later on that he got taken for a ride. That's exactly how I pictured my business venture. Casual, yet effective. We started off designing a men's clothing line as an experiment, and, to my utter astonishment, it turned into something ridiculously profitable. The revenue streamed in beyond my dreams, and I began to imagine this could be my lifelong pursuit. I needed capital to secure a proper retail space and the necessary equipment. Derek, surprisingly, never flinched when I asked for a loan. I seldom sought his financial help unless it was an investment I was passionate about. With his backing, I launched my boutique with Mia, and it took off. The demand was insatiable, and I was thriving. Sales skyrocketed, and we welcomed a flood of customers. Most guys preferred trying on the clothes in person to ensure the fit was just right. Derek often remarked on how difficult it was for men to find clothes that suited their frames, especially around the arms. I set up a cozy changing area, complete with warm lighting and full-length mirrors. Initially, Derek was incredibly supportive, frequently dropping by to shop. But somewhere along the way, he began voicing an inexplicable disdain for a woman selling men's fashion. I resisted his opinions, standing firm in my vision. Unfortunately, his mounting discontent started to put a strain on our relationship. In hindsight, perhaps I should have listened to him, but it was through this venture that I unexpectedly met Jordan. He was one of our regular online customers, purchasing shoes and ties from our website. Typically, we managed everything through Instagram, keeping our interactions strictly digital. However, one day he expressed a desire to visit the store in person. He felt the need to try things on to avoid the hassle of returning ill-fitting purchases. Living in Canada, it was a simple enough arrangement. I was taken aback when he walked into the store. He was handsome, no doubt, but there was an undeniable magnetism about him in person that I hadn't expected. Upon greeting him, I inquired about his shopping list, which included singlets, boxers, polo shirts, and a tuxedo. Thanks to Mia's husband, who provided guidance for our inventory, we had everything he wanted on hand, right down to tailored suits. In no time, he strolled into the changing room to slip on his boxers, and suddenly, I felt an electrifying urge surging through me. Yes! My FOMO was ignited, and trust me, the sight that met my eyes was nothing short of impressive. When he emerged clad in a singlet, the undeniable size of his physique took me off guard. I wasn't trying to exaggerate, he was simply extraordinary. It was a revelation akin to discovering a new shade in a color palette. I had never encountered anyone built like that before. His form was a notable upgrade from what I was accustomed to with Derek, instantly stirring my curiosity. Jordan continued to try on various boxers, and I found it nearly impossible to look away. I'm aware I may sound utterly ridiculous, but I was being honest about my reactions. While I might not relish admitting my fascination, the truth was that the allure was too potent to ignore. Mia, too, couldn't help but nudge me playfully, whispering notes of admiration about Jordan's impressive physique. We attempted to maintain composure as he purchased what he needed and eventually walked out. Once he was gone, Mia attempted to delve into the subject, zealously pointing out how striking his presence had been. I had to cut her short. I knew I couldn't trust myself or the words I might let slip. I feigned indifference while grappling with the fact that he lingered in my thoughts long after he had left. Later that afternoon, as we cleaned the boutique, Mia and I giggled over our ridiculous distractions. Out of nowhere, she proposed we host a themed event in the store, turning it into a fashion showcase that would include local artists and musicians. I liked the idea. It'd not only promote our brand, but also potentially draw in more customers. But truthfully, it wasn't just a business decision. It was a chance to attract the kind of thrilling energy Jordan brought into my life. Excitement surged through me as we brainstormed ideas, but a nagging feeling tugged at my heart, warning me of the chaos that might unfold if I let temptation lead the way once again. I knew I had crossed a line when I returned home that evening and shut down any possibility of intimacy with Derek. There was a gnawing emptiness inside me, a sense of longing that grew stronger every time I thought about Jordan. His physique was a world apart from Derek's. I had never been with someone exuding such raw energy and confidence. The nights spent with Derek, feeling more like an obligation than a pleasure, fueled my restless desire for something more exhilarating. The ache of envy gripped me fiercely, an unbearable sensation. I braced myself for the backlash. I could already imagine the judgmental comments echoing in my mind, branding me as unfaithful. I was married, or at least I used to be, yet here I was, harboring feelings for another man, a discovery that both thrilled and terrified me. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt I had to taste this forbidden fruit, feeling like I had missed out on life's most colorful experiences. One fateful evening, I could no longer suppress my restlessness, and, almost on a whim, I sent Jordan a message. Hours crawled by before he responded, but when he did, it felt like the spark of a fire igniting between us. I crafted casual topics, from the sleek new clothing line we were launching to the dazzling promotions we had in store, probing for something deeper. The banter flowed effortlessly, transforming our conversation into something flirtatious, electric. Eventually, he hinted at wanting to meet, casually asking for my address. My heart raced as I deflected, asking for his instead. He was quick to share, and with a mix of anticipation and nerves, I made plans to visit him the very next day. My need for excitement eclipsed any restraint I attempted to summon. Upon arriving at Jordan's loft, I was met with an intoxicating atmosphere. High ceilings, expansive windows displaying a breathtaking skyline, and the subtle scent of leather and spice hanging in the air. Jordan greeted me with a charming smile that sent butterflies fluttering in my stomach. I figured I should at least mention my marriage, so I casually dropped the line, expecting it would cool the spark between us. Instead, it fueled the flames. "That doesn't really bother me," he said, his voice playfully dismissive. Reflection clouds my mind now, but back then I felt exhilarated by his daring vitality and words. I was swept away by the moment, caught in a whirlwind of forgotten desires. What followed was a tempestuous embrace, one that spiraled into passionate encounters, not once, but 3 exhilarating times. I found myself surrendering in a way I had never anticipated, spending the night ensconced in his world before returning home to face the consequences. When I opened the door to my apartment the next afternoon, dread twisted in my stomach. Derek was already waiting for me, his posture tense and his eyes swirling with questions. Did he sense my betrayal? It was unusual for me to spend the night away, and that thought alone perhaps ignited the confrontation brewing within him. Our arguments spiraled into a chaotic blend of accusations and desperate pleas. He questioned my loyalty, suggested closing the store, claiming it was leading me down a path of reckless decisions I'd never made before. I could see the hurt in his eyes, a flicker of suspicion sparking. As he grilled me, I felt every lie perched at the tip of my tongue. How could I confess? How could I bear to reveal that I had stepped outside the boundaries of our vows? The thought of Derek walking away shattered me, yet I knew that the truth would only amplify the pain. He was my anchor in turbulent waters, the one constant in my life. I loathed the thought of losing him, which had driven me to endure the stagnation of our marriage. But here I was, trapped in a twist of fate, caught between the man I had committed to and the thrill I craved. Guilt weighed heavily on my heart, but the allure of secrecy began to seep into my mind, a dangerous seduction I no longer knew how to resist. Call me what you will for concealing it, but I convinced myself it was the only reasonable choice I could make. The ease with which I buried my truth stemmed from my belief that I'd never cross paths with Jordan again. My mindset was that our brief entanglement was in the past, and I wouldn't need to face him anymore. I resumed my daily routines as if nothing had happened, moving through life with a facade of normalcy. I couldn't even confide in Mia about it. The thought of sharing my infidelity with her felt like a betrayal in itself. Despite our close partnership, the idea of revealing my secret, my betrayal of Derek, was too daunting to fathom. The fear of how others would judge me paralyzed my ability to speak up. Yet, as it turns out, keeping secrets seldom leads to favorable outcomes. I learned the hard way that lies eventually claw their way into the light. No matter how adept one is at hiding the truth, it eventually resurfaces like a relentless wave. The fallout from my reckless choices started to seep into my life with Derek. It was naive to imagine we could simply resume our relationship, oblivious to the cracks forming beneath the surface. There would inevitably be signs he'd catch on to my betrayal. The shift began subtly, marked by my newfound indifference during our intimate moments. I had lost interest in the physicality of our relationship, the spark dulled by my lingering memories of what it was like to be with someone like Jordan. Before Derek, my romantic experience had been limited, a brief high school fling and a serious college relationship that never ventured into bedroom territory. I had never truly discovered what I wanted until Jordan opened my eyes. Now, intimacy with Derek felt lackluster, disappointing even. Derek did his best to navigate my coldness, but as time wore on, his patience thinned. He confronted me about my distaste for our time together, and I stumbled through a series of feeble justifications. A headache here, exhaustion there. Eventually, during our moments together, Derek could sense my hesitation, a wall I constructed around my heart. My evasive behavior stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and I could feel the tension swirling between us, thick enough to cut with a knife. Derek, ever perceptive, began to shadow me with his scrutiny. I caught glimpses of his concerned glances, yet I played the part of an oblivious wife, determined to shield him from suspicion. Then one day, everything shifted. My phone rang with a name I couldn't quite believe was appearing on the screen: Jordan. My heart raced as disbelief washed over me. We had deemed our encounter a fleeting mistake, one I thought forever buried. I merit no accolades for my folly. I'm well aware of the mess I've created. I wrestled with feelings of guilt, yet at the moment, the lines between right and wrong blurred entirely. I was lost in a whirlwind of self-indulgence, oblivious to how deep my betrayal cut. When he proposed we meet, his invitation felt simultaneously exhilarating and bewildering. Jordan was never one to approach matters slowly. His boldness confused me, but I found myself agreeing, curiosity piqued. Over drinks, in a dimly lit bar decorated with quirky art pieces and vintage records, he leaned in and told me he had feelings for me. The confession shocked me. Here was a man who knew I was married expressing admiration as if it were a casual remark. My pulse quickened, battling a cocktail of confusion and thrill. The last thing I needed was additional complexity in my already waning marriage. Did he expect me to abandon reason and leap into the unknown, disregarding the life I'd built with Derek? I struggled to find words, my thoughts racing ahead of the seriousness of the moment. As we sat in that cozy nook of the bar, the silhouettes of other patrons around us blurred into an indistinct backdrop. Mia's lively spirit graced the storefront next door only moments before. She had been setting up her latest pop-up shop brimming with artistic flair. Her vibrant, eclectic style stole attention, and the colorfully adorned walls spilled creativity into the street. Just as I pondered my next move with Jordan, I could imagine Mia bustling through that boutique, oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. Lila, lost in her turmoil, realized perhaps that distraction could only carry her so far. Confessed feelings steered her toward a precipice, a place where the desires she had suppressed battled to emerge, threatening to topple the fragile facade of her life. That's why I asked Derek to give me a moment to gather my thoughts after our last conversation. He kept ringing my phone, trying to check in on me, his voice filled with concern. But the truth was clear to me. There was no chance I could ever develop real feelings for him. I was drawn to the thrill he brought and, admittedly, his prowess in bed. In a moment of weakness, I found myself surrendering to temptation once more. I had told myself I would resist, but the allure of what might be consumed me again, and I craved one last taste of that forbidden excitement. I know it sounds terrible, and only now does my common sense begin to resurface. Back then, I thought I was acting in my own best interest. I arranged to meet Jordan for what I promised would be the final time, and I spent yet another night lost in that exhilarating connection. Afterward, I made it abundantly clear to him that our rendezvous had to cease because Derek was starting to sense something was amiss. I couldn't risk his growing suspicion any longer. Jordan nodded, understanding the predicament I was in, assuring me that it was for the best. He even mentioned he was planning to leave the city for a work transfer, which I hoped would facilitate a clean break. I erased his contact information on my phone before stepping out his door. My plan was to return home directly, since I assumed Derek would be at the office. But I was blissfully unaware of the reality. When I arrived, he was home, waiting for me. Since marrying him, he had never missed a day at work without a valid reason, always dedicated to his job, so seeing him there was disconcerting. You might wonder why his presence unsettled me. The truth is, I had spent the night away, and knowing how our relationship had been strained lately, I braced myself for impending drama. I was certain the only reason he had skipped work was to confront me about my late-night escapade. As I predicted, the moment I stepped through the door, the storm broke. Derek didn't give me a chance to settle in before unleashing a barrage of accusations and hurtful words, going so far as to say he suspected I was unfaithful. His assertion shocked me. I hadn't expected him to be so blunt. Yes, I knew he had noticed my odd behavior, particularly when I stayed out late, but I never thought he would connect the dots to infidelity. The argument escalated rapidly, and despite my efforts to maintain my composure and not incriminate myself, the conversation spiraled out of my control. It started with him pressing for explanations. "Where were you last night?" he demanded. "Why didn't you come home again, Lila? Where did you sleep?" His questions caught me off guard, and I had no prepared answers. I hadn't anticipated returning home to him this time. In the throes of our heated exchange, Derek accused me of acting like I was the most desirable woman alive, denying him the intimacy he craved. Anger surged within me, and I shot back, revealing a truth that had always lingered in my heart. "Maybe I'm cheating on you with someone who actually knows how to satisfy me," I snapped, my voice rising in defiance. "You're not even the hottest guy in the room." Just then, it clicked. I realized he had been probing me, seeking confirmation of his suspicions. He wanted me to confess, to acknowledge the truth I was unwilling to accept, and I had unwittingly played right into his hands. In the midst of our confrontation, my mind drifted momentarily to a new venture Mia and I had discussed earlier that week. We were planning to launch a pop-up boutique that would showcase our unique blend of art and fashion. The thought of our exciting project contrasted with the heaviness of the moment. It was a stark reminder that life beyond this tumultuous relationship existed, and that my creative endeavors awaited me. But dealing with the storm within did nothing to quell the tension in the room. As Derek's eyes bore into mine, searching for the truth, I felt an overwhelming mix of terror and resolve. This was a turning point, one that could not be undone. That's how my marriage came to an abrupt halt. Derek was so furious that I feared he might actually lose control. But to his credit, he managed to restrain himself remarkably. I genuinely admired his ability to keep his composure under such distress. I could have approached things differently, but in that moment, my frustration got the better of me. He ordered me out of our stylish urban apartment that very day, and within 2 weeks, I was served with divorce papers. He didn't even bother to approach me directly. Our last connection was shattered, and since then, all communication came through cold, formal channels. I signed the papers, and now I find myself anxiously anticipating our court hearing to make the divorce official. My reckless choices and unchecked curiosity have led to the disintegration of a 2-year union. Update. Hey everyone, I'd like to fill you in on everything that's transpired since my last message. The divorce was finalized a couple of months later. Before we parted ways for good, Derek ensured he reclaimed the funds he had entrusted to me for the boutique. Thankfully, I managed to settle that debt thanks to the earnings I'd generated from the business. All correspondence came through his attorney. Never once did we speak face to face again. The last words exchanged between us were during that fateful confrontation when I confessed to my betrayal. The weight of guilt is crushing, and I'd give anything to undo what I've done, but it seems I'm powerless against the consequences of my actions. I allowed my impulses and wanting desires to lead me into a terrible spiral, from which I now wish I could escape. Life teaches you that you only understand the value of what you had when it's completely out of your grasp. Just months ago, I never imagined I'd miss Derek as profoundly as I do today. Back then, cheating felt like the answer I sought, a misguided liberation. It's only now that the truth hits me with such intensity. I shouldn't have tied the knot with him if my heart longed for something else. That was unjust, not only to him, but also to myself. As I stood in the now empty space of my once shared apartment, I felt pangs of nostalgia for the life we built together, the evenings spent laughing over dinner, the quiet mornings where the sunlight spilled through the expansive windows, illuminating our dreams. I remember the time Mia came over and we transformed the kitchen into a makeshift art studio, splattering paint as we nervously discussed my discontent. In those moments, I could almost touch the thrill of potential, the invigorating promise of what could have been, but I allowed the allure of excitement from Jordan to cloud my judgment, leading me on a path I never anticipated, ultimately burying what I held dear. If only I had recognized that the thrill I sought was fleeting, while the love I had with Derek was a steady foundation I chose to forsake. Now, as I brace myself for the impending legal finality, I am haunted by the lesson I've learned too late, a tale woven with the heavy threads of heartache and regret.